Hey card making friends, it's Sandy here and welcome back to my channel. By request today I have a 5-step mixed media card video for this card that I shared the other day. Had lots of requests, so I snuck it in and we're going to build a couple of these. We're going to be using the Cosmos die set. This is new from Simon Says Stamps, and all the dies are attached in one little piece. And next we're going to be using this sunflower pattern stencil set, and there's a bunch of stencils in there. I'm working on this card. I just need to add a sentiment to it. And then finally the old letter 6x6 background stamp. This is another new one that I really like. The sentiments are from the Cheering stamp set. This is also new in the latest release from Simon. And then you're also going to need a couple of A2 size white card bases, so 4 1/4 by 11 scored and folded at 5 1/2, and a couple of pieces of 5x6 watercolor paper. Oh, and a scrap to do the sentiments. You want to die cut 3 sets of the Cosmos, and we're going to start with the sentiments and just get that out of the way. We're going to start with heat embossing, but I want to color the paper first. So what I like to do is ink blend a scrap of white paper the same color as what I'm using on the cards. That way I know my sentiment's going to match perfectly. I don't have to go through my stash of cardstock trying to find something that's going to match. So of course I'm using the Pawsitively saturated inks from Simon Says Stamps, and I have ink blended the 2 colors that I need for my 2 cards, and I'm going to grab one of the sentiments from the Cheering stamp set and attach it in my Misty. Okay, close it. I'm going to add some Versamark ink, and I'm going to white heat emboss this. And you'll notice I'm going to flip this around and do the second one at the same time. But when I go to put my embossing powder over top of it, I miss one of the words. So I quickly have to go back and do a second one, just in case you don't notice. I'm hoping you don't, but hey, stuff happens sometimes. What can I say? Okay, so we're just heat setting this, and then we're going to trim it out with my little trimmer and set them aside because we don't use them again until the very end of the cards. So you're just going to quickly trim these. I just kind of eyeball them. Okay, and we'll get rid of the trimmer. Next up, we're going to do our other heat embossing. So I'm taking the old letter stamp, turning it upside down on my glass mat, and getting rid of any of my fingerprints on my watercolor paper, inking up with the Versamark. And then I'm simply going to take this paper, I'm going to turn it over, lay it down, and rub all over it. And this is going to transfer the ink for me, and then cover it with the white embossing powder, shake off the excess, and heat set. So for this technique, because we're going mixed media and nothing needs to be perfect, there are no rules, it doesn't matter if you get a really good impression with that stamp, because we're doing so many layers, you're not going to notice. Next up, we're going to smoosh, and you saw that I used my ink pad. I just pushed it down on my glass mat. Love these glass mats, and added some water and then smooshed my paper into it. Okay, this is also called emboss resist technique, where you can see the embossing that we just did because it resists the ink that we're playing with right now. And just a note, if you get any of those big blobs, wipe them off because they're not pretty at the end. Thankfully, I have that lovely cloth that I could just wipe it off, and also it will get rid of any ink that's sitting on top of your embossing. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the second card, and this is surf ink. And so the original card from a couple of days ago, this is how I started it. I'm just doing 2 different colors for you. I'm reversing the colors to show you that you could do it either way. And this one, I got a little bit too much water in my ink, so you'll see that in a second here, I'm going to wipe it up and I'm going to start again, smooshing some ink onto my surface, adding a little bit of water, and then adding my paper. And you want to dry this in between layers so that you get a nice variation of color in the background. Okay, and then heat set them because we're going to move on to stenciling. Okay, in the Sunflower Pattern Stencil set, there are a bunch of different stencils, as you can see. What I'm using is the large sunflower that has the squares in between, and also the one with the leaves. And you also want to angle the stencil because this stencil is built to go in lines straight across. In mixed media, it's very seldom that you get lineage straight across. Everything is very random. So by angling the stencils, you eliminate that. And I just keep moving the stencils around until I get nice coverage, double checking it, going back and forth to see if I have any glaring spots hanging out where there's kind of nothing. And I'm starting with the lightest of the teal inks, which is the Dew. And you don't want to get carried away. I show you near the end of the video one that background that I tried that I used the mist and the raindrop, and it's way too dark. And so stay on the light side. And the stencil brush that I'm using is from Altenew. I really like them. If you live in Canada, don't order from Altenew. Their shipping is insane. Order them through Simon. You get a way better deal. Just a heads up there. Okay, so I have moved over to the leaf stencil. And I'm adding leaves, mostly around the border, and then a couple in the center. And then we're going to do kind of the boken technique with the circles that are on the leaf stencil. Okay, I'm just keep removing it and looking for spaces that I need to fill in. And I've done a lot of the teal now. And I'm going to go back and forth between Dew and Heather. So now we're going to do the little squares. And it's very important in this one that you angle the stencil. Because again, the squares are in a line. And I don't like lines when I'm doing mixed media. I guess that's what it is. I like them really random. So move the stencil around, and basically what you're doing is adding a little bit of background noise for this card, and you just want to add a pop of purple in the back because it's going to pull out the color of the flower, and vice versa. Okay? And you don't need to get too carried away with little squares all over the place, but just kind of random. Okay? Now I'm working on the circles, and you'll see that I have really, really, really turned the paper as well as my stencil. Okay, I'm going to clean my stencil off now with my cloth and change over, and we're back to Dew, the color, and I'm adding more in the background, and these are all the circles. These are such great stencils. They make a really pretty flower, but they are really fun for doing this mixed media. As soon as I opened the package, I thought, let's play. Okay, and so I'm adding these on the light side as well. Again, background noise. I really like background noise in my cards, as you've probably noticed. And again, just checking out to see if I need anything. And there's a couple of spots where I'm adding a couple of flowers. Okay. There's a glaring spot down in the bottom right-hand corner that apparently I haven't seen yet. And you're going to be cutting this down and tearing the edge. So some of this is going to disappear. Okay, so I'm getting really close to being finished. Kind of like that one. Now I'm going to switch over to the other one. So here's the purple background. And again, just cleaning my stencil off. And we're going to do the reverse. So most of the background stamping is going to be done. Okay, we're starting with a little bit of purple, so I'm adding some of the flowers, angling my stencil again. And I did get a little bit carried away with the smooshing on this one. If I was going to do it again, I would add a little bit more water in the smooshing stage to dilute that ink a little bit more so that the background wasn't quite so dark, because there's spots where you can't really see the over stenciling that we're doing because it's so dark. Okay, so I'm using Dew and I'm adding the little squares now. And of course, when you turn them on an angle, they kind of turn into diamonds. So my contrasting color. Okay, I'm just kind of messing with that. Now we're adding leaves, and I'm doing those in the Dew color as well, or the teal. And I don't really angle this stencil too much because the leaves are kind of random. They're around the edge and there's different shapes. They're not all the same. So you can get away with not having to move the stencil around too much. Okay, and again, mostly the border. And back with some more squares. And a couple more leaves. Ooh, I like it. Okay, a couple more spots that I missed. I don't know why I'm doing the edges. I'm cutting them off. And when you cut this, you're going to go down to a 4 by 5 1/4 because we want a border showing from our background. Okay, so here we are finished, and now we're going to do some splatter. So I'm using some white paint, acrylic white paint, and then I've got my watercolors out. I couldn't find my black acrylic paint, so I grabbed my Gamsatambi watercolors, and the second from the bottom on the right-hand side is black, and you just saw me spritz that, and that's gonna kind of warm that paint up for me. I'm going to move it out of the way so I don't get white splatter all over it, and I'm going to splatter the heck out of both of these. So splattering, if you just tap it with your finger, you're going to get large splatters. If you tap it against a paintbrush, you're going to get small splatters, and you want a variation of both of those. It adds interest to the background of your card. Okay, so now we're switching over to the black. Need a little bit more water. Get the white out of the way, and don't clean any of these because once we're finished making the flowers, we're going to splatter again a little bit. So set them aside somewhere. I have a tray off to the side that I can put wet things in, and they just kind of all get piled up in there until I'm ready to use them again. Okay, and I'm adding my black splatter. Okay, we're going to move on. I'm showing you a little tool that I like to use. And I am using Barely Art glue. And I know this is hard to see because it's white on white, but I'm taking all 3 of the flower pieces, the centers, and I'm gluing them together in stacks. And of course, I'm doing that a couple of times because I have 3 sets here going on for each color. And so here's the stem. I'm layering 3 of those together. And the fine tip on the Barely Art glue works really well for gluing small things together. Okay, so you're going to do that for each of the cards. And then we are going to use the Sage ink on the stems and a small blending brush, and you're just going to color them up. And I show you here, there's a white spot that I can't get rid of. It's because I got a little bit of glue on the top. But we're going to ink splatter this anyway, so it really doesn't matter. If it was going to be like a really defined card, then I would probably do something about it. Okay, so you're just quickly going to add the ink to that, and then we're going to switch over to Simon's Intense black ink, and I'm going to make the centers of my flowers black. I wanted a little drama, and I needed something that went with the black ink that we splattered, and so I like to do a second of that color somewhere on my cards, just because they kind of pull the two together. And I'm smartly using tweezers for this step because you can get black ink pretty much anywhere trying to hold onto it with your finger. Okay, so let's do the flowers. We have a set, so 3 large ones, 3 small ones, and we're going to do a set of each in light, medium, and dark, okay? So we start with the bottom one, and I'm using the lightest color here. And you're just going to do a light layer. And I am going to come back to this one with one of the darker colors because it's going to be the top layer on my flower. We're going to be stacking these. And I want a little bit of shadow in the center. So I'll come back when I get to the dark ink and I will, well, I'm going to do it right now. Add a little bit of black or darker purple to it so that I have my shadow. And here's the next color. Again, just putting a nice layer down. You want to hold on to these a couple of petals at a time so that you don't tear them. And don't push too hard on the blending brush so that you don't tear any of the petals off. And do both your colors at the same time. I forgot to do it to the bottom one, so I'm going to have to clean my brush and go back and do the bottom lightest ones. So I'm working with Heather, Violet, and Iris. And these are Simon Says Stamps Pawsitively Saturated Inks. They blend really well. I'm also using Simon's brushes. I like their brushes. And my camera's going out of focus because there's too much white. Okay, we're going to the Iris, which is a darker color. You want to tread lightly with this one. It's really, really dark, and your flowers will turn almost black if you're not careful. So, And again, we're in mixed media, so your blending does not need to be perfect. And we're also going to be layering these. So, okay, with the dark color, I'm going back, and here's where I add the centers to the lightest flowers. Okay, just a little bit. There we go. And I've already done the teal colored ones, and I'm using dew, mist, and raindrop for those. So now we want to glue all of this together. Starting with the darkest one at the back, you're going to put the medium colored one over top of it and offset it just slightly so that you can see the darker one in behind. And you're going to do that with all 3 of the petals, and the same for each of the flowers, the big one and the little one. And then glue the large center to the center of that one, and repeat with these little guys. Okay, offset them just slightly, and then add the lightest one. And again, the small flower center. All right, we need to cut these down. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting the top and the bottom, and I'm going to get to 5 1/4. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to 4, and I'm just putting a little notch in there. I have this cool ruler left over from when I was a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and it's called a tearing ruler. It's got these cool sides, and you just tear up against it, and it gives you really nice edges. If you don't have one, use a paintbrush and wet your watercolor paper. I grabbed one of the black dots when I was doing that, and it allows the watercolor paper to tear easier. And it also kind of tears where you wet it. And then if you get wide pieces, rip that off too. Now we're going to attach the flowers to our art pieces, and Simon has come out with nice new foam squares, small ones and large ones. I really like the small ones. So I'm just opening a new package. You get 4 sheets in a package, so kind of a good deal. And I often use my Spellbinder scissors to cut them in half for smaller spots. Today I'm just adding a small square to each of the flowers, and I'm kind of positioning them on my art piece to determine where I want to glue my stem in. And I should have used my tweezers grabbing this stem. Add your glue to the back, find your tweezers, and then lay this down. Now your watercolor paper got wet, it's embossed, there's all kinds of stuff going on. So hold on to that for a minute or two, just so that it gets securely on there. Okay, and then you can add your flowers. Going to do the same thing with the purple one. Add some glue to the back of the stem and then glue it down. Okay, and then you want to hold on to that. One-handedly, I am going to add my foam squares to the back of my flowers. I hate to waste time. We've got to get this video done. Okay, and then attach the flowers. And then you're going to grab your paint because we're going to do a little bit more splatter for the flowers. Okay, so line those little guys up together. If you don't want to tear, this is a really nice die set from Sizzits and Tim Holtz, and it gives a nice torn edge to it. And I will link that over on my blog, just in case you don't like tearing. Okay, so we're going to splatter. We're going to get the white paint going again with a little bit of water. And I'm splattering mainly the flowers, okay, because you've already done the background, but it doesn't matter if you get a bit of background. Just enough to be interesting. Okay, and here's my black back in. I have a little jar of water off to the side that I pop my paintbrushes in so that they don't dry out. Okay, so I'm adding just a bit of black, a couple of big ones, a couple of little ones. And working on a glass mat, you can just add some water and wipe your glass mat clean. And this is why I love my white glass mat, because I can see where the paint is. Okay, cards, putting them together. The first one that I showed you a couple of days ago, I did a white background and I really like it, but I thought, hey, we're doing 2 more cards. Let's change it up a little bit. So I grabbed a couple of cardstocks from my stash, a teal and a purple, and I'm going to add them to the top of my top folding A2 size cards. Sometimes they don't line up perfectly. I am totally in love with these scissors from Spellbinders. They are so awesome. They're no stick, but I use them for everything, and they're great for trimming out your card bases. And I do 1 layer at a time, as you can see. Okay. So trim out your cards so you don't have any white showing, and then I'm going to use tear tape for the back of this. Again, the watercolor paper is thick. You got it wet, you heat embossed it, you stenciled over top of it, and you splattered on it, so it may not be flat, and you want a nice professional finish on your cards. So using the tear and tape, it's stronger than any of the tape rollers, and it will hold everything in place and make your card look nice and professional. So the sentiments, I have more of the square foams on the back, and I'm just attaching them to the bottom, covering this stem on the left-hand side. Finally, we're moving on to a little bit of embellishing, and I'm using Simon's Clear Positively Dazzling Gems and a surf color as well. So the teal is the surf color over on the teal colored card, and I decided to use the clear ones on the purple card because I couldn't find any purple ones. I don't know if they have them or not. Spellbinders also has a very nice purple gem. I am pretty much in love with all of their gems. So you just want to grab, I like 5. I like even or odd numbers. So either 3 or 5. I prefer 5. So 2 around the bottom of the sentiment and then 3 up around the flowers. And I'm using bigger ones because they're not the same size as on my ink splatter that's on my card. So they stand out a little bit more. And you just want to use your Barely Art glue to attach them. And there we go. We're finished all our cards. So here's the one that I shared the other day. It's light and it has a white background. And then the other 2 that we have created. So everything I used today is linked underneath this video. There is also a link over to my blog where you can get the cutting instructions and a thumbnail of each of the products that I've used today. And if you enjoyed today's video, please help me out and leave a thumbs up and a comment. It really does help. Oh, I'm showing you right here. This is the dark one that I ended up way too dark. And so that's where I mean stay on the lighter side. Anyway, back to my blurb. It really helps me and my YouTube channel if you leave a thumbs up and a comment and share it with your friends. And if you do, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for stopping in. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I've added a couple more videos at the end of this that I thought that you might like. Until next time, toodles!